Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Bonds and Stories, we retell those moments honest, everyday, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. The fog drifted in off the harbor and pressed close to the clapboard house as Evelyn Hart turned into her gravel drive at 3:40 p.m. The little weather vane she and James had mounted above the porch, an iron codfish squeaked once and pointed due east toward the slate-gray water. No cars lined the curb. The porch light, which she always left on if company was coming, stayed dark. Somewhere out past the spruce windbreak, a buoy bell clanged hollow and patient. Evelyn killed the engine, sat for a beat with both hands on the wheel, and listened to the car tick as it cooled. Thanksgiving used to arrive with a choir of sounds, her son Caleb on the steps balancing pies, Nora calling through the screen for more napkins, the twins thumping down the hallway in sock feet. Today, gulls in the codfish vein. She picked up her overnight bag, locked the car, and walked up the 3 porch steps that had browned with salt over the years. A plastic tub of winter sand sat where a welcome mat had been. Someone had moved it. She noticed everything 40 years in the same house will do that to a person. The front door stuck at the top as always, and released with a sigh when she shouldered it. The foyer smelled faintly of pine cleaner and cold air. From the living room came a wash of weak lamplight, one pool on the floorboards. She set her bag down, reached for the wall switch out of habit, and a voice from the lamplight said, "Quite calm, I wouldn't. Takes my eyes a while." Evelyn's spine went tight, and all the little practice drills the solitude of widowhood had taught her fell into place. She kept the door at her back. "Who are you?" she asked, "and why are you in my house?" "Lionel Pierce," the voice said. "Please forgive the intrusion. I'm occupying your rocker under protest." He sat in James's old chair, the maple one with the worn runner's long legs crossed at the ankle, like he was waiting on curtain time. His hair was a disciplined white, shaved close at the sides and left bristled on top. A cane leaned against the end table. He lifted one palm, a gesture both apologetic and theatrical. "If it eases anything, the lamp isn't yours." "I brought it. Bad lighting is the enemy of old knees." "Names," she said. "You've got yours, you know mine. Mrs. Hart." "Evelyn." "Your mail labels in the foyer basket are not discreet." He gestured again. "Also the photographs. You play piano. So did my wife. I'll stand if that helps." He pushed himself up. He was taller than she'd expected, the kind of tall that comes with long bones and long habits. She ignored the little scrape of the rocker runner against the floor James's chair and went to the living room doorway. On the coffee table lay a folded sheet under a magnet shaped like a lighthouse. She knew Caleb's handwriting at a glance, the neat block letters he'd adopted in high school to please a math teacher who couldn't read slant. Mom, change of plans. Nora's team got a last-minute package to a wellness retreat in Sedona Thursday Mondiacum. We're going, everyone's flights are tied to it. Lionel's residence closed for a few days, gas issue temporary. Could you host him? He's Nora's stepfather. We'll celebrate on Monday night when we get back. You two will get along, both organized, both opinionated. Love you. C. P.S. He's got his own food and a pill organizer. Don't let him lift anything heavy." Evelyn read it twice. The codfish weather vane groaned. She smoothed the paper and placed it back where she'd found it, magnet and all. "Gas issue," she said. "So they tell me," Lionel replied. He had not resumed the rocker. He stood with one hand on the cane posture, straight in that careful, stubborn way that people over 70 use when they still intend to steer their own ship. I was collected, deposited, and encouraged to be docile. The encouragement failed. "What did you tell them?" she asked. "That I am not docile." He gave the briefest of smiles. "And that I can make tea if needed." Evelyn did not smile back. She walked into her kitchen, flicked the light, and set the kettle on. The familiar weight of the blue enamel pot steadied her hands. She opened the refrigerator, took in the pie shells, the celery and onion, the covered bowl of cranberry relish she'd made on Tuesday, and shut the door gently. She turned to find Lionel in the doorway, hat in his hand now as if he'd remembered his manners late. "Do you always walk into strangers' kitchens?" she asked. "Only when they set a kettle on and I hear it complain," he said. "I can wait in the hall if it corrects the offense." "Sit," she said finally, and pointed to a ladder-back chair. He obeyed without commentary, which she registered as either deference or strategy. She took 2 mugs down a thrift store pair with a lobster printed on them, claws faded by the dishwasher, and hunted for the tea tin. Lionel watched without talking, and she decided she preferred him that way. "I'm sorry for the intrusion," he said when the kettle began to murmur. "I was given little choice. I argued for a motel. I was told this would be better. I dislike being scheduled by others." Evelyn measured leaves into a metal ball and latched it shut. "So do I." The lid rattled as the kettle tipped. Steam bloomed soft as a cat. She set the mugs on the table, slid the sugar across, ignored the honey. Lionel took his tea plain apparently. He lifted it once, breathed, and set it down without sipping. "I'm told you teach piano," he said, not quite a question. "I taught. I still have 3 students. Fewer scales, more Bach." She let the tea settle. "Said unforgivable things to actors for 40 years and called it directing," he said dryly. "University theater, a few regional houses. These days I train teenagers not to argue like talk radio." Evelyn let her mouth twitch at the corner. "Debate coach. Rehabilitation project," he said, "mostly for the adults." She considered the note again, the blithe apology, the stack of assumptions folded into the word host. She could hear Caleb's voice, honest and hurried, meaning well. Meaning well was a wide net. It snared more than fish. "Why my house?" she asked. "Sedona is far from Harborfield. They could have called. They could have asked." "They wanted a clean break," Lionel said. "That's my guess. No arguments at the curb. No conversation that might sprout. No, they're not villains. They're efficient." "Efficient," she repeated. The word tasted like aspirin. He blew across his tea and took a careful sip. His hands were ugly with arthritis, the knuckles big as hickory knots, the fingernails neatly trimmed. "If it alters the temperature of the room, I can leave. The gas issue is real. I can ask Mrs. Ruiz across the lane to call me a cab. But the truth is my knees dislike stairs and strange bathrooms, and I would rather not spend the holiday in a room that smells like industrial carpet." "My bathroom is not strange," she said. "It's just small. I am an adaptable man." Another spare smile, contrary to the press. They ate what could be called dinner, around 6 clam chowder from a can, doctored with pepper and a splash of cream and soda crackers that had survived a winter in the pantry. Lionel insisted on opening the tin with the old church key opener like a man performing a rite. They ate at the kitchen table because the dining room felt ridiculous with 2. The house settled around them as darkness tightened along the window seams. When they spoke, they kept to the present tense. The harbor buoy, the way fog erased the neighbors' Christmas lights into colored blurs, the quiet satisfaction of a good hinge, mudroom hooks, the flip of the porch latch, small literal things, 2 people measuring another person's weather by the objects they choose to name aloud. At one point, Lionel said, "You didn't turn on the porch light," as if he were reminding her of something she already knew. She finished her soup and said, "I noticed." After the dishes, she gave him the small spare room at the back of the hall with the braided rug and the window that faced the old spruce. He put his bag on the chair, laid his cane carefully along the wall, and tested the bedside lamp like an inspector. "Good," he said. "I hate halogens. They glare." He stood there, hands in his pockets, examining the baseboard heater as if it might talk back. "I appreciate your trouble," he added, which was not an apology and not a plea, more like a marker, placed where both could see it. "Trouble is for leaks," she said. "This is inconvenience." He let out the smallest breath of amusement, a crucial distinction. They drifted back to the living room with mugs of hot water and the lemon wedges she liked at night. He did not reclaim the rocker. She folded a wool throw and put it across the arm of the sofa habit, and then, without thinking, nudged the rocker forward until it sat 4 inches off the braided oval. James's chair, her floor. 4 inches was enough. Lionel noticed and said nothing. He lowered himself into the ladder back again and tipped his head, studying her with something like professional interest. "We have been cast," he observed without an audition. Evelyn let the line sit between them like a coin on the table. "Then we can decline the role or we can rewrite it." "Do you prefer 1 act or 3?" he asked. "I prefer the truth," she said, "and boundaries." He nodded as if taking the stage directions. "I am good at boundaries," he said softly, "harder at leaving well enough alone." The codfish weather vane squeaked. Fog pressed against the window like a big damp hand. In the kitchen, the clock thumped once as the hour rolled over. Evelyn stood crossed to the rocker and touched the back rail. She looked at Lionel and said in the voice she used with anxious students just before performance, clear and warm and not to be mistaken, "You can stay." He didn't rise, didn't reach for her hand. He simply answered, "Thank you," and after a beat added Evelyn. She went for the kettle again. When steam curled, she tapped the burner off and let the sound of the metal cooling fill the spaces that conversation could not usefully fill. When she returned to the living room, she set a fresh mug on the end table beside the rocker and took the sofa opposite, feet planted back straight. "House rules," she said. "Shoes at the door. Lights off when you leave a room. If you move something, put it back." "Noted," Lionel said. "In exchange, I request immunity for reading aloud when I find a sentence that demands company." "I'll allow it," she said. He folded his hands. The lamp made a soft circle that didn't quite reach the corners. The harbor bell sounded again, faint, as if the tide itself were thinking. Evelyn lifted her mug. "All right," she said. "Dinner's done. The door's locked. The chair is 4 inches forward. That seems sufficient." Lionel's eyes, a very undramatic gray, held her gaze. "Sufficient," he agreed. They sat together in that precise sufficiency until the lamp's switch felt ready to turn, and the house, grateful for the finality of a decided thing, exhaled, Harborfield, Maine. By 7 the next morning, the fog had thinned to a gauze, and the codfish vein had gone quiet. The house held its breath in the way old houses do before heat wakes the pipes. Evelyn found Lionel in the kitchen, already dressed, the radio, whispering a weather report through a halo of static. He stood at the counter measuring coffee like a ritual, level scoops, tap level again while the kettle waited its turn on the back burner. "You were up early," she said. "My knees file their own schedule," he said. "Coffee is the union rep." He had set out 2 mugs. The lobsters again, claws faded to pale pink. A small correct touch, he'd left the mugs upside down on a folded dish towel so the rims stayed clean. Points to him then. "You take it with milk?" he asked. "Just hot," she said, and when his eyebrow lifted a fraction, added tea later. They ate toast with butter and a half grapefruit. They halved neatly and salted the way James used to. Lionel tuned the radio to something less severe than news, a call-in show, where people argued gently about snowblower brands. At 8, the door knocker thudded twice, polite but urgent. Evelyn crossed the hall and opened to the smell of cold air and cinnamon. "Too quiet in your driveway last night," said Mrs. Ruiz, holding a foil-wrapped pie like an offering. "I baked extra." She was tiny and quick, a retired nurse, with the kind of stare that could coax a fever down by itself. She peered around Evelyn's shoulder, clocked Lionel in a heartbeat, and smiled. "Guest." "Temporary," Evelyn said. "Of course." Mrs. Ruiz pushed the pie into Evelyn's hands and kept talking. "I also came to warn you. New batteries in your smoke alarm are so enthusiastic you can hear it from the lane. Don't light those pine candles unless you're ready to meet the entire neighborhood." "Duly noted," Evelyn said. Mrs. Ruiz leaned slightly and addressed the kitchen beyond Evelyn's arm. "Sir, if you like your coffee strong, the grocery has Italian roast on sale. 3rd shelf blue bag. I hope you don't mind neighborhoods that keep an eye." "On the contrary," Lionel said, rising with a care that made the cane look like a prop again. "I prefer witnesses." After she left, Evelyn set the pie on the counter. Lionel's glance swept the aluminum, the crisp crimped edge, the card tucked under the twine, apple no nuts. "Hospitality," he said. "One of the few civic virtues with calories." Evelyn heard herself say, Will returned the dish and understood too late to snatch the word back that we had slipped out without permission. They washed the 2 breakfast plates, dried, and put them away. The kettle called upon obliged with its punctual crescendo. The house settled by degrees into a favorable mood. At 8:12, she sent the first message to Caleb Thumbs, moving without committees. All good here. Don't worry about earlier. Handled. Enjoy Sedona. She put the phone face down. Lionel did not ask what she'd written, and she did not volunteer it. Boundary, yes, but also a quiet sense of sport. By 9, the day's light was decisive. Evelyn brought the small vacuum and a stack of rags to the living room and knelt beside the maple coffee table James had built the year the twins were born. A constellation of white rings, little moons from careless mugs had dimmed it over time. She rubbed one with her thumb as if it might apologize. I'm going to strip and oil it, Lionel said from the doorway as if offering a weather forecast. Excuse me, the table. If you have mineral spirits and 220 grit, I can coax that finish back to life. He planted the cane near the sofa and bent to study the top, squinting like a surveyor. It's good maple. No crime scenes last forever. She opened the basement door, embarrassed by the small heat in her face. In the cellar, the boxes marked paint, etc. Don't breathe the word varnish in my house. Oil only. I am not a barbarian, he said, and descended with care that belonged to a man who disliked being seen as careful. They set up a drop cloth, taped the edges, and spread the work between them. He handled the dry work, sanding in long, patient tracks, while she took the cloth work, wiping, buffing, and later, when the wood turned thirsty, spooning oil into the grain until it glowed the color of toast. The room filled with the warm, clean smell of effort. They worked mostly in silence, the good kind. At 11, the smoke alarm proved Mrs. Ruiz correct. Evelyn lit a balsam candle in the kitchen to sweeten the mineral spirit smell, then turned to rinse a rag. A minute later, the alarm went off with the fervor of an ambulance, a strobe of pure offense. Lionel didn't flinch so much as wince in rhythm. Evelyn climbed the chair, reached, and discovered she was exactly 1 inch too short. Permit me, Lionel said, already moving the ladder back into place. He stepped up one careful tread at a time, slid the battery case open, and pressed the test tab with a pen cap. The alarm shriek cut. The sudden quiet felt like applause. They stood together for a second, breathing like people who had outrun something that wasn't actually chasing them. Overly dramatic, Lionel said. I should feel kinship. Open the window, Evelyn said, and flipped the latch herself. A knock came just then, 2 beats. A pause, a third, and a uniformed patrolman leaned in through the storm door. Everything okay? Got a ping on the neighborhood app? Someone heard a screamer. False alarm, Evelyn said, candle with ego. The patrolman flicked his eyes from the ladder back to Lionel's cane to the drop cloth, concluded that no arsonists were hiding under the throw pillow, and tipped his hat. Happens to me with bacon. Welcome to winter. When he left, Evelyn typed a second message, more honest about sound than substance. We're fine. Smoke alarm louder than the kettle. Kind neighbors, all under control. She placed the phone face down again. Lionel said nothing, but a corner of his mouth did. They ate slices of Mrs. Ruiz's pie for lunch, cut into satisfyingly precise wedges. Lionel insisted on washing the knife by hand, because apple sugar ruins edges. He read the back of the coffee bag aloud in a voice that turned marketing into parody. Notes of cedar and leather as though we drink closets. Do you always read aloud? Evelyn asked more bluntly than she'd meant. I do when the sentence asks for witnesses, he said, softer now. I can stop if it trespasses. It doesn't, she said then, because she wanted the truth of the house tidy added. It does if there are guests and a radio and a kettle all at once. Too many voices, he said, noted. They returned to the table and the work went faster because they had learned each other's small habits, the way she folded rags in fourths like cards, the way he slid the sandpaper around his block exactly flush so no corner would cut. When the grain finally drank its fill and the maple shone, Evelyn stood back and let a breath out she hadn't known she'd been holding since James died. I can live with that, she said. You can dine with it, he corrected. And then, as if sensing the moment had ripened enough for a joke, added, "You may even put a mug on it if your coasters union agrees." The day edged toward afternoon. The wind rose and fell softly. The harbor bell was a metronome with manners. Lionel drifted toward the porch, tracking the light like a house cat. Evelyn followed with the sweater and found him at the rail with a small bundle of cedar shingles in his hands. "What are those?" she asked. "A half-started birdhouse I found in your cellar behind the snow shovels," he said. "James's handwriting on the plans." The man liked orderly diagrams. He stopped mid-cut. He lifted one shingle, then another. It felt rude to leave it unfixed. She brought the toolbox without waiting to be asked. He held the pieces while she drove the narrow brads. He tied a loop of twine while she sanded the entry hole smooth. They hung the little cedar house under the eave where the wind wouldn't bully it, and stepped back in simultaneous approval. It wasn't elegant, but it was correct. Inside at the kitchen table, Evelyn found herself saying, "I'll text Caleb once more." She typed slower this time, composing the sentence like a chord. No citations issued. "Please stop trying to call the residence office closed for maintenance. All well here, E. Citations," Lionel said, amused. "A word with a badge? They'll translate it however they like," she said. He tilted his head. "We're going to be unhelpful. Just less helpful than they prefer," she said, allowing a very small smile. Late afternoon brought a thin, clean light that dressed the whole room evenly. Evelyn put the kettle on. Lionel thumbed through a book of coastal photographs she kept, because the horizon calmed her black and white dunes, a lighthouse shouldering fog. He read a caption aloud without asking permission, and she let it stand. "The sea is a patient editor." The small argument found them around 5 quick and nearly bloodless. Lionel reached for the newly oiled table with his mug. Evelyn slid a coaster toward him midair, a small reflexive slide that carried 40 years of habit. He stopped mid-reach. The mug hovered. "And there it is." He said the words neither hot nor cold. "It's new oil," she said. I know," he said, setting the mug on the coaster with delicate gravity. "I am not being managed. I am being reminded." "You dislike reminders," she said. "I dislike being 12, he said, then added, failing to make a joke of it, "and I dislike being 84 when someone else decides." Evelyn considered the mug, the coaster, the wood shining like an argument you can't win. "I'm sorry," she said. "It came out plain and American and fine. It's a muscle. Sometimes it fires on its own." "I accept," he said. "And I apologize for the dramatics. The table is handsome. You did the real work. I like the shine." They ate chowder again because there was more and because the day had crowded out grocery lists. They tore the last of the soda crackers into quarters and floated them like small boats. Lionel told a story about a college production where the thunder machine jammed and the student stage manager made thunder with a baking sheet and a sack of rice. Evelyn described the sound of a piano action in winter, how you can hear felt, learn to be felt again when the heat kicks on. After dinner, Lionel washed. Evelyn dried. The air warmed with that easy choreography of 2 people doing things at the correct size. He read one column from the newspaper aloud, just one, and she didn't correct him. At 8:40, Caleb texted, "What happened earlier? Smoke alarm, are you safe? We can step out of sessions and call." Evelyn set the phone between them on the table. "He's a worrier," she said, "since middle school." Lionel tapped the screen with one blunt finger, not to type, just to weigh it. "We could be precise," he said. "Or we could be, what's the term, succinct." She sent, "Safe. Excellent neighbors, everything handled. Please don't change plans, E." Then she silenced the phone, not as a tactic so much as a breath. They sat in the living room again, the rocker now exactly 4 inches forward, as if the house itself remembered how to hold 2 people. Evelyn opened the piano without making a ceremony of it and played 6 slow bars of Bach very quietly, hands light, the notes stitched so thin you could see through them. Lionel listened with his head tipped just enough to make agreement visible. When she stopped, he said, "I will now commit a crime and read one line." He picked up the coastal book again, thumbed once, and said, "Home is the place that knows your exact weight." That's more than one line, she said. It is, he agreed. Charge me. Evelyn reached over and straightened the lamp's shade by a fraction only she would notice. The buoy bell in the harbor found its old tempo. The maple table, oiled and new as a promise you weren't asked to sign, reflected one soft ellipse of lamplight and kept the rest for itself. They let the day finish them, not the other way around. Frost had embroidered the porch rail by 9 fine as lace on old linen. The codfish vein twitched once toward open water and settled. Evelyn zipped her coat to the throat and found Lionel by the mudroom bench lacing boots with the concentration of a surgeon. He wore a dark wool cap that made him look more opinionated than usual, which was saying something. Market first, she said, then the point. I approve of a plot, he said, standing with that deliberate care that allowed dignity to get there first. Shall I offend your sensibilities by bringing the cane? Offend the ice instead, she said, and handed him a pair of rubber cleats she kept for the front steps. He studied them like a puzzle, then affixed them to his boots with an efficient snap she recognized from people who've spent a lifetime pretending not to be in pain. They took the old Subaru because it forgave slow turns and ugly parking. Harborfield's winter market loaded itself into the town hall like a memory chest, folding tables, quilts draped for warmth, the smell of cider apples blistering in a cast-iron pan. A fiddler near the coat rack worked a tune that asked people to sway without making promises. Lionel paused just inside the door, as if the flood of sensory information had knocked politely and then stepped in anyway. Scout Evelyn asked, Done? William? Blocking, he murmured. That corner is choke point. If we go counterclockwise, we'll miss the line at the donuts. We're not missing that line, she said. They let the crowd carry them forward. Harbor kids in knit hats, a man selling honey from jars with crooked labels, a teacher with glue on her sweater showing wreaths made of book pages. Mrs. Ruiz materialized near the raffle table, a sprig of rosemary tucked behind one ear. You look less haunted, she said to Evelyn, then cocked an eyebrow at Lionel. And you look like trouble I would let in. Occasionally housebroken, Lionel said and earned a quick laugh. Mrs. Ruiz pressed 2 raffle tickets into Evelyn's palm. They're drawing for a fish chowder gift basket. If you win and you don't share the neighborhood, we'll take it personally. Evelyn pocketed the tickets and snagged a paper tray of cider donuts dusted with sugar that tried to escape in every direction. Lionel bit into one and went still, eyes closed, as if tasting had to commandeer all other systems. When he swallowed, he opened his eyes and said, Solemn as a pledge, we are not telling anyone at SEDONA about this. At a table of hand-thrown mugs, Lionel tested the weight of a blue glazed cup, turning it in his hands as if he were auditioning a prop. He addressed the potter directly. This lip is honest. The handle is a little theatrical, meaning the young man asked, wary and curious in equal measure. It looks like it wants to be looked at, Lionel said, and set the mug down gently. No verdict beyond that. The potter nodded, as if given a reading on whether he already knew. Across the aisle, a woman at a card table sold cedar oil and little tins of wax labeled Bosun's Balm. Lionel pointed at the word bosun and pronounced it correctly without blinking. Bosun, he said, approving the spelling as much as the smell. He tested the balm on his knuckles, and it turned the angry white hills of arthritis a little less angry. You'll ruin your gloves, Evelyn warned. I own soap, he said. At the back of the hall, an amateur photographer had clipped prints to twine with clothespins. Coast in winter, all gesture and grayscale. Lionel stepped closer. Do you know him? He asked. Evelyn shrugged. Everyone knows everyone by one degree and politely ignores it. He made a small noise she understood as yet. They left the hall with a loaf of bread still warm in its paper sleeve and a brown bag of apples. The air outside made her eyes water from clean. They walked down to the harbor where a woman in a red scarf tended a kettle on a camp stove and sold cups of chowder labeled cash only in thick marker. Are you cash? Lionel asked. Sometimes, she said. Other times I'm Marie. $5. They ate standing up, watching gulls fly parallel to the pier as if following invisible rails. Lionel braced the paper cup with both hands and regarded the broth with respect. Bacon at a reasonable volume, he said, and she recognized praise when she heard it. The road to North Spit Light curved through scrub pine. They parked in the little lot and took the path along the dune grass, the cane biting into sand with patient clicks. The wind pushed hard shape by water into something focused. The lighthouse stood 100 yards off on its granite shoulder, white as a set piece whose cue had finally come. "Steps," Evelyn said. "My knees and I are on speaking terms," he said. "We negotiate." He took them one at a time, both hands on the rail, stubborn as tide. Evelyn kept half a step behind and a little to the right where a hand could be offered without making a spectacle of itself. At the top they stood in the lee of the tower, the wind's voice lowered to something you could breathe through. From here, the harbor widened into a gray page. A lobster boat tugged a line of traps toward a seam only its captain could read. The sky spoiled and mended itself by turns. "Storm took the lower pier when I was a kid," Evelyn said. "The planks went like cards. You could hear them. Like someone teaching you the sound of failure, plank by plank. Opening night of a Greek tragedy," Lionel said. He leaned against the tower and considered the horizon like a man reading a long sentence. "We once had a ceiling grid collapse in Act 2. An overconfident screw. No one was hurt." The actors finished the scene as if the gods had thrown furniture. The audience stood and cheered not for the art, but for the nerve. "You approve of nerve," she said. "When is tidy," he said. "Nerve without discipline is just noise." They stood. Wind found its way down collars and past cuffs. Evelyn tucked her scarf closer and thought of James's hands on a camera, the way he'd adjust a lens, without looking as if his fingers knew focal length as muscle memory. She reached into her coat for the small digital camera he'd left behind with everything else, and turned it on the screen, waking with a blue rectangle like an obedient window. "Turn your cap so it doesn't shadow your eyes," she said to Lionel. "Director notes," he said, and obliged. She framed him half profile and then took one of both of them, his shoulder almost but not quite touching hers. The lighthouse factored in as if it might grant credibility. After a second frame, Lionel said one more and angled the camera to arm's length. The wind tried to take the moment. The shutter took it back. She sent the second photo to Caleb with a sentence that fit in one screen and no more. "Great day at the Point. Good company. Considering a few arrangements for after you're back. Don't worry." She tucked the phone away and they walked the perimeter, once slow, counting the bolts on the base ring because it pleased Lionel to count things built to last. On the way down the steps, he stood a beat on the lowest one and inhaled like a man choosing to keep what he'd seen. Wind at their backs, they followed the path toward the parking lot. An older couple came the other way, cheeks pink with cold, and nodded in that New England way that communicates mutual respect for weather and silence. In the car, the heater found their hands. The phone vibrated twice in Evelyn's coat. She let the first go answer the second when she saw Caleb's name. "What arrangements? Is everything okay? Should we come home early?" She typed, "All okay. Please keep your plans. We're handling things on our end." A minute later, "This is vague, Mom. Are you safe?" She typed, "Yes. Harborfield is small and kind. Don't spend money changing flights." When she put the phone back, she exhaled without meaning to. Lionel watched the dashboard vents as if he could make them better by noticing. "I could have said more," she said. "You said enough," he said. They drove back by the long way where the road ran so close to the marsh that the grasses leaned like people at a parade. In a turnout, a man in waders stood hip-deep in water, motionless, his fly line curved behind him like handwriting. At a roadside stand closed for winter, but optimistic by nature, a rack of scarves hung under a sign, "Honor Box $15. The scarves were knit from that particular Maine gray that seems made out of fog and sweaters left on the back of chairs. Evelyn stopped and slid cash into the cigar tin and chose one that matched nothing she owned. Lionel put his fingers in the fringe and nodded. Some colors don't have to try. Back at the house by mid-afternoon, they carried market things in bread apples, a paper carton of chowder Marie had insisted on filling for them with a purposeful efficiency that belongs to people who know where the bowls live. The birdhouse under the eave clicked once in the wind, a small wooden syllable. The codfish vein made a lazy half-turn and thought better of it. Evelyn warmed the chowder and sliced the bread. Lionel moved the coasters onto the newly oiled table without comment, set 2 places, and stepped back as if to check the composition. They ate late lunch at 4, spooning in rhythm, the kind of meal that asks nothing more from anyone. Afterward, Lionel rinsed the bowls and set them to dry. Evelyn wiped the table with a soft cloth exactly once and put the cloth away. They retreated to the living room. She opened the piano lid an inch and then closed it again, not because she didn't want to play, but because the quiet had its own pitch. Caleb texted at 4:23, "After we're back means what?" "Should we prepare for changes? Nora is anxious." Evelyn kept the message on the lock screen and did not touch it. Lionel saw, then looked away, granting privacy. He sat on the ladder back and rubbed a thumb over the soft grain of the cane's handle, as if the wood itself could explain something. "Do you want me to disappear for an hour so you can talk on the phone?" he asked. "I don't need a stage," she said. "I need a room that knows my exact weight." He inclined his head, the acknowledgement small and correct. Dusk came on like a long inhale. The harbor bell sounded twice, then 3 times, finding its own logic. The world outside the window simplified itself to smudges and intention. Evelyn stood, went to the porch, and tested the little birdhouse string with a fingertip. It held. When she came in, Lionel had turned on the lamp and taken the blue glazed mug from the market out of its bag. He set it on the end table and studied it the way a man looks at something that might earn a place. "The handle still wants to be admired," he said. "Then let it," she said. "We've done enough sanding for one weekend." He smiled very slightly and reached for the kettle. The burner clicked, the flame took, and steam began its climb. The maple coffee table shone without apology, the house pleased with its own inventory. The chair 4 inches forward, the lamp correctly shaded, the coasters arranged as if they had chosen their positions, stayed easy in its bones. When the water sang, they poured it over tea and sat as if the chairs had rehearsed their angles. Outside, the lighthouse winked once through the kitchen window, a trick of fog and imagination. Inside, the codfish vein forgot to squeak. The clock in the hall made its small, truthful sound, counting things that did not ask permission to be counted. Sunday began with a sky the color of paper that has known winters. The house creaked itself awake, radiators tapping a distant pipe, clearing its throat, while Evelyn whisked eggs in a blue bowl and sliced a pear into compass-true wedges. Lionel arrived in the doorway with a folded newspaper under his arm and a look that said he'd been up long enough to have opinions. "You cook like a metronome," he observed. "Useful in kitchens and Schubert," she said, and slid an omelet from the pan with a clean hinge of the wrist. They ate at the newly oiled table that seemed to have decided to belong to them both. Coffee went into the blue-glazed mug from the market. Tea into a lobster mug. Butter softened into obedience. The radio tried the weather and failed to make it interesting. When they were done, Lionel stacked plates with professional quiet and said in the tone of a man naming a necessary errand attic. Evelyn looked at the ceiling as if the boards might answer, "Yes." The pull string hid in the closet, like a shire tail on an old kite. She reached, tugged, and the staircase folded down with a dry exhale. Lionel tested the first step with his cane, then set the cane aside and climbed with both hands on the rail, deliberate as a liturgy. Evelyn followed close enough to catch him, and far enough not to make catching part of the ritual. The attic had the clean dust of a space that remembers work. Boxes lined one eave like a file of patient animals. A row of old glass jars sat along a beam, each holding a coil of nails sorted by size, James's handwriting marking the lids in pencil that had faded to the color of faa. Light entered through a small gable window and made everything briefly important. "There," Evelyn said, pointing to 3 bankers' boxes labeled Photos J. Lionel eased one onto an old chenille bedspread laid over the floorboards. He didn't open it. He waited for her to undo the 2 tabs, the small ceremony of permission. She did, and the smell that came up, paper fixer, a life stored, found the hinge in her throat. Top layer contact sheets in sleeves, each square a small square of time. Beneath matte prints with deckled edges, landscapes that understood horizon. Evelyn at 27 leaning into April wind, a piano's fallboard reflecting a woman's hands, but not her face. The house before the spruce grew arrogant. James had a good eye, Lionel said, not surprised, not flattering. He picked up one frame and held it a little away from him, the way people with old eyes hold things then closer, then not at all. This one. It was Evelyn on the porch steps, shoelaces, untied hair, caught mid-argument with a breeze. The expression wasn't posed. It wasn't anything but what it was. James had kept the depth of field shallow, so the porch blurred and the eyes did not. "He saw you," Lionel said simply. The sentence arrived without velvet. Evelyn sat back on her heels and let her breath do as it pleased. "He did," she answered, because leaving the response empty would have been a lie. They worked steadily not to finish but to look. The second box held a series of winter dunes in thick grain black and white, a study in restraint. Then Harborfield's July parade with a line of firefighters in shirt sleeves. Then a sheet of negatives labeled North Spit Storm after, with a date that returned a sound to Evelyn's ears, planks talking, water insisting. Lionel's hands were careful. He set each print down the way you set down a story that isn't yours. "Do you want to take any downstairs?" he asked. "Not yet," she said. "They belong to upstairs for a while." He nodded, agreeing not with her answer, but with the fact of the decision being hers. A little later, he found an old Nikon body, heavy as a tool that means it, and turned it over in his palms. He used it, Lionel said, deciding for the room. He didn't collect it. He said lenses were verbs, Evelyn murmured. "That's an excellent marriage," Lionel said, and raised the camera to his eye with theatrical caution, not to shoot, but to imagine. He lowered it. "Light makes us tell the truth." They came down the stairs slowly because slowness was part of the engineering. In the kitchen, Evelyn washed her hands as if Fixer lived under her nails and warmed the chowder from yesterday until it woke. Lionel set spoons, set bowls, set bread, and moved out of the way like someone who has choreographed narrow kitchens all his life. Midday wrapped the windows in a clean brightness. They ate. After a few spoons, Lionel said, "What do you call help, and what do you call control?" Evelyn held the warm bowl in both hands for a beat and then answered without rhetoric. "Help is an offer you can say no to. Control arrives with a schedule." "Compatible definitions," he said. "I have improvised uglier ones." "My son," she said carefully, "forgets that no can be a loving sentence." "Nora forgets that efficient is not a synonym for kind," he replied just as carefully. They did not press. The chowder cooled and the house listened. Her phone on the windowsill lit with a message from SEDONA that said everything in a handful of anxious syllables. "Are you sure you're okay? Should we line up someone to check in?" She typed with 2 fingers, steady and spare. "We're fine. Please enjoy your time. The house has us well in hand." She left it at that and did not apologize to the air for what she did or didn't add. In the afternoon, they returned to the attic for a second hour that felt shorter than it was. Lionel found a small tin with slides mountains, a lake, a winter sky that knew how to be blue, and an old slide viewer that still worked if you asked it, please. They passed it back and forth like a toy and said very little. At some point, Evelyn laughed once aloud at a picture of James in a ridiculous hat, and then pressed the heel of her hand to her mouth and did not apologize for that either. On the way down, Lionel paused on the 4th step and allowed her to stand closer than before. Not to hold him, to make the possibility mean something. He reached the floor and said, "Thank you," which was not about the stairs. They made late afternoon tea. He read a single paragraph from an essay about winter beaches and stopped before it decided to become preachy. She returned the birdhouse hammer to its hook where it belonged and didn't explain the satisfying click it made when it settled. About tonight, Lionel said, drying a mug with a towel that had seen better July barbecues. "If there is conversation, I would like to say certain things plainly and not perform them." "I'd prefer that," she said. She didn't write anything down. She didn't need to. The sentences existed already between them: be asked, not managed; be told, not arranged; be considered, not scheduled. Evening trimmed the edges of the day and left the middle warm. Evelyn put together a simple supper, a pan of roasted carrots and onions that made the kitchen smell like memory toast, a wedge of cheese that had survived more than it should, and Lionel made a salad with the precision of someone who still shaved with a blade. They ate, and between bites he told a short story about a student who tried to cry on cue and discovered that honesty has a better technique. She countered with an anecdote about a 7-year-old who played a single C major scale as if it were news. Her phone stayed face down on the end table until after dishes, when she flipped it, answered a message asking for reassurance with a single line that managed to be both specific and not. "We're well. Please come back rested. E." They moved to the living room. The house remembered what hour this was and made space for it. Lionel lowered himself into the ladder back. Evelyn took the sofa. She opened the piano and laid her hands on the keys without pressing the way you put your palm on a door before entering. She left it there and closed the fallboard again. Not now, not no, just not now. They spoke a little about the attic, not about grief or lessons, just which box should go where next time, how to keep dust off the best frames without arguing with gravity. Lionel offered to climb again in a day or two and then corrected himself without prompting. If needed, he said. If wanted. If wanted, she echoed. The codfish vein creaked and stopped. The harbor bell counted a measure that didn't require accompaniment. The lamp threw its soft circle and the maple table caught it and declined to share. Before bed, she stood by the porch and checked the little cedar house with 2 fingers and a tug. It held. She came back in, turned out the lamp, and the house exhaled in the key it preferred. By 5, the harbor had turned to pewter. The codfish vein held still. Evelyn set a pot of cider to warm with cinnamon and a thumb of ginger, then laid bowls, spoons, and the breadboard on the newly oiled table. Lionel checked the porch light and came back in with a shake of cold off his coat. "Ready?" he asked. "The house is," she said. Headlights slid across the front windows, 2 sets in close succession. Doors shut with traveler efficiency. Luggage wheels rasped once on sanded steps. Evelyn opened the door before the bell could prove itself. Caleb stepped in, first wind-reddened shoulders, bunched as if bracing for bad news, Nora just behind him with the alert stillness of someone walking into a room she can't quite predict. "Mom," Caleb said, already halfway to an embrace. "I'm fine," Evelyn answered, and his arms went around her anyway. He smelled like airport and desert air. In the living room, Lionel rose from the ladder back with the cane but not the apology. "Welcome home." "Hi, Lionel," Nora said, cautious. "Thank you for being here." "Thank you for the adventure," he said, as neutral as weather. Coats found hooks. Suitcases waited obediently by the hall table. The 4 of them settled in the living room where the lamp traced its familiar circle and the rocker sat as it had for days now, 4 inches forward. Evelyn took the sofa. Lionel stayed in the chair that didn't rock. Caleb and Nora shared the couch that used to belong to holiday crowds. Nora looked first at the coffee table. "It shines," she said, surprised despite herself. "We oiled it," Evelyn said. "It looks good," Caleb offered, as if the word might be charged. "We cooked it," Lionel said mildly. "Apple pie helped?" Nora's mouth twitched. The moment held. Evelyn folded her hands. There was no fire. The smoke alarm met a candle with ideas. A patrolman visited, admired our bacon volume, and left. Caleb blinked, then let out a breath that had been camping high in his chest since Arizona. "Okay." The messages, Nora began and stopped. She picked again. They were hard to read. "They were tidy," Lionel said. "We edited." Evelyn kept her voice level. "We didn't want a long-distance consultation. We wanted a door that shut and opened here." Caleb nodded slowly, translating. "You wanted space." "I wanted to be asked," Evelyn said, not informed. Silence took a seat and behaved. Nora smoothed her travel scarf once with flat fingers. "We went about it the wrong way." Yes, Evelyn said. It came out plain. She didn't furnish it with adjectives. Caleb sat forward, hands linked. We booked the retreat because everything lined up and it felt like if we asked, you'd say no. And we thought he stopped chose again. We thought maybe you and Lionel would get along. We do, Lionel said, almost cheerful. On the days that end in Y, Nora glanced at him. I told Caleb you could be difficult. I can, he said. I contain multitudes, most of them opinionated. Evelyn is likewise not a dull afternoon. This is not a problem. We were trying to help, Caleb said. Help is an offer you can refuse, Evelyn said. Caleb's eyes flickered to hers and steadied. Right. Nora looked at Evelyn with the kind of attention that doesn't multitask. I'm sorry we put you in that position. I should have asked if you were okay hosting Lionel. I should have asked Lionel if he wanted a different arrangement. Apology accepted, Evelyn said, and it landed like a plate put exactly where it belongs. Lionel angled his cane against his chair leg. While we are distributing clarity, my residence is closed for maintenance, yes. It is not a nursing facility. I am independent until proven otherwise. Understood, Nora said, and to her credit, the word sounded like acceptance, not a memo. Good, Lionel said. I dislike being a problem someone solves by moving furniture. They migrated naturally to the kitchen as if called by gravity. Evelyn ladled hot cider into mugs, 2 lobsters, the blue glaze cup from the market, and a plain white one that always seemed to find visitors. The steam made the room smell like stories told well. She set the cider on the table and uncovered the chowder pot that had survived one more reheating with dignity. Sit, she said. Eat. They did. Bread tore. Spoons went in, came out. The maple gleamed and nobody set a mug down without a coaster, though no one announced the rule. On the porch, a soft wooden click from the birdhouse sounded now and then whenever the wind adjusted itself. Halfway through a bowl, Caleb tried again. The texts about arrangements after we're back? Housekeeping, Evelyn said. The attic, the table, the birdhouse. Caleb waited. She didn't add anything else. He nodded and ate. The room's temperature held. Lionel reached for the salt, paused, and looked to Evelyn. Permission to season. Granted, she said. He shook exactly twice, then set the shaker equidistant between them, like a man who understood architecture at the scale of condiments. Nora noticed and tucked the observation away without comment. When the bowls were empty and the cider had lost its first heat, they rinsed and stacked and wiped without choreography, but with competence. In the living room again, the lamp returned to its known duty. Caleb and Nora sat where they had sat before. Lionel kept his chair. Evelyn reclaimed the sofa. No one filled the air just to keep it busy. Caleb cleared his throat, so, going forward, we're already here, Evelyn said. It wasn't a correction, it was a fence line. He took it. Okay. Nora looked from one elder to the other. Is there anything you want us to hear while we're all sitting down? Evelyn considered this question and gave it the weight it asked for. If you plan something that includes my house or my time, ask me first. If you think I need help, ask me what help I want. If I say no, believe me. Nora nodded. Yes. Caleb's mouth shaped a thanks and then stayed closed, which served better. Lionel lifted the cane an inch and let it settle. I would add only that I read aloud without warning and make omelets without remorse. If that ever intersects with your logistics, send a memo in a tone that expects compliance and see how far it gets you. Caleb laughed once a clean sound, noted. The house seemed to ease an inch in its joints. Outside, a gust turned the codfish vein just enough to confirm it wasn't broken. Evelyn stood and adjusted the lampshade by the fraction she always corrected. The room snapped into focus the way it does when a picture frame is straightened. Dessert exists, she said. Mrs. Ruiz delivered apple pie because quiet frightens her. They ate it standing at the counter with forks. Nora closed her eyes at the first bite unguarded. Caleb insisted on washing the plates, then surrendered the sink to Lionel, who refused to let a blade dull in soapy water. The rituals arranged themselves without rehearsal. When the door opened later for goodbyes, the air outside had shifted up a degree. Coats went on. Luggage stayed sensibly by the hall table where it would wait until it had a job again. Caleb hugged his mother with less urgency and more accuracy. "We're glad you're okay," he said. "I am okay," she said. He looked past her to Lionel. "Thank you for the clarity. Thank you for the pie," Lionel said, "and for the opportunity to disapprove of your planning." Nora stepped in and hugged Evelyn with careful warmth. "We'll call tomorrow," she said, then corrected herself at once. "We'll ask if you'd like a call." "I'll answer if I do," Evelyn said. The door closed soft. Headlights retreated. The house took back its quiet, which was not empty so much as thorough. Evelyn returned to the living room and set the empty pie plate on the end table to remind herself to get it back to Mrs. Ruiz. Lionel lowered himself into the ladder back without comment. The lamp described its circle. The maple table caught a clean oval of light and kept it. "Cider?" she asked. "Yes," he said. She poured. They sat. Somewhere outside the birdhouse touched its bracket once like a small satisfied syllable. The harbor bell counted a measure neither of them needed to name. The chair remained 4 inches forward. The room held. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.